drop-down effect, we need to install the drop-down menu from ShadCN UI. All right, so let's jump over here. Now, one other thing that I forgot to do is the sign-in button. I actually don't want to have that the ghost style. I want it to be dark like this. So back in the header component, so shared header index, where we have the second button for the sign-in, I'm going to get rid of the variant so that it has the dark background. All right, now let's install the two things we need. So one is going to be npm install next-themes. That allows us to control the theme. And then we want to run npx shadcn at latest add, and then it's going to be drop-down -menu. And this might ask about so right here. If you don't see this, just ignore it. If you do have this, just choose the legacy peer dependencies. All right, now we're going to first off add the theme provider, because in order to change the theme and have that functionality, you need to wrap your page in the provider. So we're going to do that in the main layout. So app layout TSX, not the root layout. So here, let's import, we want to bring in the theme provider from Next Themes. And then we're going to come down to the output here, and the children, we want to wrap that in the theme provider. So children prop, that should go in between. And then there's just some attributes we want to add here. The first attribute is actually attribute, and it says that the HTML attribute modified based on the active theme, and it accepts class, so it can change it by class or by data attribute. We're going to use class, so just set that to a string of class. Next is going to be the default theme that you want to use. I'm going to say light. Next we have enable system, so that will enable us to have that option of not just light and dark, but also the system theme. And then also disable transition on change, which will disable all CSS transitions when switching themes, and that's to avoid certain issues with transitions. Okay, now another thing we're going to add is in the HTML tag, we're going to have the suppress hydration warning, because there are some things that we're going to run into, and there's something else we have to do to fix this as well. But basically, Next Themes uses the window object to deal with the changing of the theme, and the server doesn't have a window object. So it's going to tell us in the console that there's a mismatch between the server code and the client code. And this is part of what we need to do to stop that. So I'm going to save that, and we might see the error now. Let me check the console. Well, it looks like we're not seeing it, but I'm sure it will come up at some point. But let's see if we change the default theme to dark and reload. There we go. So now we can change the theme. Obviously, we want something in the UI. We want our drop-down so we can change it in the UI. So that's what we're going to work on next. So let's go to Components, Shared Header, and in the header folder, we're going to create a mode-toggle.tsx file. And let's say sfc enter and call this mode toggle. And just for now, we'll just have the text of toggle. And we want to bring this into the header index file. So up at the top, let's import mode toggle, and then we want to put that right above the cart button. So right here, mode toggle. All right, so you should just see the text toggle. Now, we're going to be using some hooks in this mode toggle, and in order to use hooks or event handlers or anything that's going to be dynamic on the client side, we have to make this a client-side component, because by default, all components are rendered on the server with Next.js. And to make it a client, we just say use client at the top. All right, that way we can use hooks, and one of the hooks we want to bring in is going to be use theme. That's from Next Themes. And then right above the return, we can initialize our theme variable, and also set theme is the function we call to change the theme or to set the theme. And we just set that to not use state, but use theme. All right, and then let's start on the output here. So we'll get rid of the toggle text, and this is going to be a drop-down menu. Now I can import this with control period, and you don't want the radix UI, you want this components UI drop-down menu. That's where all of our ShadCN stuff is. And then we need the drop-down trigger, which also comes from that file. So let's say drop-down menu trigger, and that imported it from the wrong place. So you shouldn't see this radix UI. This drop-down menu trigger should come from this as well. So get rid of this line if you got that. You know what? Let's just bring all the drop-down stuff in that we need, just to avoid any confusion with that. So put a comma here, and then we also want the drop-down menu label, and then also the drop-down menu separator, and then the drop-down menu content. think that should be it as far as the drop-down components. All right, now for the trigger, we're going to go ahead and this is going to have a button inside of it, so we're going to use as child. And then inside of it, let's say button. Let's bring that in from UI components or components UI button. So that should be brought in like that. And then, let's see, on the button, I'm just going to add a variant of ghost. And the button is going to be an icon, so let's bring in the icons that we need from Lucid React. So we'll say from Lucid React, and 3 icons. One is going to be sun icon, moon icon, and sun moon. All right, now we're going to check what this value is, this theme value. So let's add an expression here. So we'll say if theme is equal to system, then, so we're just using a ternary here, then I'm going to have some parentheses, and I want to put the icon of sun moon. Okay, so if it's system, I want to show the sun moon icon. Else, if the theme is equal to dark, then I want to show the moon icon. Okay, and then else, then I want to show the sun icon. Take a look, and you can see we have the sun icon. Now, if I were to go to the layout and change the default theme to dark, and got to reload for that, you see it goes to the moon icon. Now, this error here, this is what I was talking about. So you can see it's a hydration error because once again, it's this one. It shows you a couple reasons why this could happen. It's because of this, because it uses window, and the server doesn't have a window object. So to suppress this warning, because this right here doesn't do it alone, but what we can do is just make sure that the component is mounted before it uses the theme, or before it changes the theme. So to do that, we're going to bring in useState and useEffect. So we're going to bring in useState and useEffect from React, and we're just going to set a piece of state. You guys have probably done this before. It's pretty common. So let's say mounted, and then set mounted. Set that to useState, and it's going to be false by default, because obviously it's not mounted by default. But then what we'll do is have a useEffect, and in that useEffect, we're going to then set mounted to true. Okay, and we have to add our dependency array, which is just going to be an empty array. And then all we have to do now is check to see if it's not mounted. So if the component is not mounted, then we're simply going to return null. So let's save that and let's reload. And you shouldn't see that error anymore. All right, and I'm going to change the default theme back to light. There we go. All right, so back in the mode toggle, we need to finish this because we just have the button here, right? We don't have, we don't have the drop down. We have the trigger, I guess. We don't have the menu. So underneath the trigger is where we want the drop down menu content. So let's say drop down menu content, and we'll have the label. So drop down menu label, and the label is going to say appearance. So underneath the label, we're going to have a separator. So drop down menu separator, which is self-closing. Okay, so if we take a look, there we go, and see. Oh, see that border? I want to get rid of that. So we can add onto the button. We're going to say class. Let me just close the sidebar up. So class name, and we're going to say on focus dash visible. On focus dash visible, I want to set ring dash 0. And on focus dash visible, I want to set the ring offset to 0. That should get rid of that border thing. All right. So now back down here below the separator, we just need our checkbox items, and that's what I forgot to bring in. So right up here, let's say drop down checkbox item. Okay, so we're going to add first, we have 3 of these, so let's say drop down checkbox item, and this is going to have, let's put the text in the middle, which is going to be system for the first one, and we want to add 2 props here. One is going to be checked, so this is just the expression to see if it's checked or not, and we want it to be checked if the theme is equal to system, then it should have a check. All right, and then we're also going to have an on click because we want to set the theme if it's clicked. So in the on click, we'll just have a function, and it's just going to call set theme from that use theme hook, and it's going to set the theme to system. All right, so if I save that and we take a look, you can see system. It's not checked because that's not the default. I mean, that's not what's enabled now. So we just need this checkbox item, copy it down twice, and we're going to change on the second one this, this, and this to dark, and then on the third one this, this, and this to light. Now you can see light is checked. If I click dark, it changes, and dark is checked. System, it changes. My OS is set to dark mode, so it's dark, but I'm going to set it back to light. And that's it. Now we have a dark, light mode, and dark mode, and as well as whatever your system is. All right.
So now we're going to create a loading page and a not found page, and you can do that just by simply calling a page a certain name. So let's start with the loading, and this will show whenever something's loading. If you're switching pages or whatever it might be, and you want to show a spinner or you want to show some text, and to do that, you just have to go into your app folder and create a file called loading dot, and then whatever. We're using TypeScript, so it's going to be TSX. If you're using JavaScript, it would be JSX or JS. And you can see right away this breaks because this is not a React component, it's an empty file. So we just need to add here, let's say SFC, and we'll call it loading page. And for now, I'll just say loading. Okay, and if I reload, it's too fast to even see, but I'll show you a trick to test it out in a minute. Let's just get the loader in here. Now, a few videos back, I had you bring in some assets, and in the assets folder is a loader.gif. And I'm using this because this looks good on both dark and light mode, where you could use like a package like React Spinners or something like that, but you might have problems getting it to look good on dark mode or light mode. You might have to bring the theme in and say, if it's dark, use this loader, if it's light, use this loader, but this looks good on both, so this will work. So let's bring in image, the image component, and then we want to bring in the image itself. So I'll say import loader, and that's going to be from, and then @/assets/loader.gif. And then in here, we'll get rid of that text, and I'm going to return a div with the image inside of it. So we use the image component here, and the source, for the source, we're going to put the loader variable that we brought it in as. And then for height, we're going to do, what do we want to do here for height? Let's do 150, and then width also 150. And then for the alt, I'm just going to say loading ... All right, now in the div, I want some classes here. Actually, let's not use classes. We're just going to use style. So style, set it to double curly braces, and then I'm going to set the display. Let's set that to flex. And then we're going to set the justify content to center. I want it centered both horizontally and vertically. So we'll do align items, set that to center as well. And then for the height, we'll set that to 100 VH, viewport heights. And then and that has to be in quotes since we're using JSX. And then the width, let's set that to, we're going to set that to 100 VWs, viewport widths. Make sure we have a comma here. All right, and that should do it. Now, if we can't see it, if I reload, yeah, we can't see it. So what I'm going to do is go to the home page, and I'm just going to add a temporary delay. So what you can do is just, we'll create a variable up here called delay, and I'm just going to set that to an arrow function that returns a promise. So we'll pass in here, pass in ms, and we're going to say new promise. This isn't going to stay. This is just to test this out. And then promise takes in a function with resolve, and in the function body, we just want to set a timeout, and then call resolve after a certain number of milliseconds, which is the ms. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is make this homepage component asynchronous for now because the promise obviously returns it's asynchronous, so we want to await on the delay function, and we'll do 2 seconds, so 2,000 milliseconds. All right, so now I'm going to come back over here and reload, and there it is. So it should show for 2 seconds. Okay, and we don't have to keep all this. This was just to test it, so I'm going to get rid of all that, and this doesn't need to be asynchronous, so just put it back to how it was. So that's our loader. Now let's do the not found. So if I go to like / whatever, something that doesn't exist, this is the default page, but we can add our own custom page. So we do that by, in the app folder, create not-found.tsx, and let's do SFC. We'll call this not found page, and for now, Just say not found. Okay, so you can see it just shows the not found text. Now, this is going to have a button with an on click, which means that we need to make this a client component. So I'm going to say use client, and then I'm going to import the app name because I'm going to use that in here. So app name, that's going to be from Constance, and we're going to import the image because I want to show the logo, which is in the public folder, and then also the button component from shadcn. All right, now in the div, in the return, let's add a div, and I'm going to give it a couple classes. So we'll do flex dash call, items dash center. Let's do justify dash center, and let's do min dash h dash screen. Okay, now in that div, I'm going to have the image, and the source for that is going to be the logo, which is in /images/logo.svg. You should already have that there. And then I'll do the width of, let's say 48. Let's do a height of 48. And let's do, for the alt, I'm going to put the app name. So in here, I'm going to put some backticks with a template literal and say app underscore name and then logo. And then just set the priority to true. All right, so that's our image. If we take a look, so this is our current not found page. It's just the logo. Now underneath the image, we're going to have another div, and let's do padding 6. Let's do rounded large. We'll do shadow medium and text dash center. And then I also want to add a width of 1/3, so W-1/3. You can't do that with Emmet. That's why I put it in after. And then inside that div, we'll have our H1, set the size to text-3XL, and font bold, and margin bottom 4. And the heading is just going to say not found. But then underneath the heading, still within the div, I'm going to have a paragraph with text-destructive, which will give it a red text color. And we're going to say could not find, what do I want to say? Find requested page. And then lastly, I just want a button. Okay, so the button, we're going to give it a variant of outline. So outline, and then class, we'll do margin top 4 to push it down, and then margin left dash 2. And then I'm going to add an on click. And I just want it to go to the home page. So what we can do is just set it to a function, set that to some parentheses, and just say window.location.href, set that to the home page. And there's a million ways you can do this. This is just one. And in the text, we'll just say back to home. All right, so not found, could not find requested page, back to home, brings us back to the home page. All right, so we now have our loading page and our not found page. And put that right under the cart button. And there we go. But later on, we'll have a user button component, and when we're signed in, it will show it'll show the profile link and so on. But yeah, that's pretty much it for now. We have our responsive menu, so that on small screens, that collapses, and we can still select those options. So in the next video, I want to actually start to list some data, and we're not going to start with the database just yet. We'll just have a TypeScript file with some data, bring it in, and we'll construct our product card components and just list some products on the page. Videos from now will start to deal with the database. So that way we will already have some UI in place to display products when we fetch from the database. So in the downloads for this lesson, you'll have a folder called sample data, and in that you're going to have two folders, a DB folder and an images folder. Now the images, these are the same images that we brought in, I think in the first video where we brought the resources over. If you didn't do that, then just bring this images folder right into your public directory. Okay, and then you also have a DB folder with a sample data.ts. So the DB folder, we're going to put that right in the root. So just drag that over, copy it. All right, so now this sample data, basically right now what we're going to do is just use it to bring directly into our file. And then later on, we're going to use this same file to seed our database with so that we can get some data in the database without having to manually enter it. All right, now just to kind of look at the data real quick so you're familiar with it, each product is going to have a name and then a slug, and the slug is just basically the name that is in URL format, so lowercase with dashes, and then a category, a description, an images array, because each product can have more than one image, a price, brand, rating, number of reviews, stock, is featured, and banner. So basically the banner is for products that are featured. And just the first two, I believe, have those fields. The rest don't. All right, so, and I believe there's, what, 6? Yeah, I think there's 6 of these products. All right, so what we're going to do is bring, let's see, we're going to go to our home page, so app, and then root page.tsx, and let's bring the data in from that file. So we can say import sample data from DB sample data. Yeah, so we're going to import that. And just to make sure that we can see that, let's do a console log of sample data, and then just go to our home page and reload. And if we look in the terminal here, you should see, there we go, we have our products showing. Okay, now I want to display these in a component called product list. So let's create that in the components folder, and then in shared, we're going to have a new folder called product. And this will have components in it that are associated with products. So let's create a new file, and we're going to call it product-list.tsx. And let's say SFC and product list. Now this is going to take in a couple props, so we want to destructure, and it's going to have the data and also a title that will just be put into an H2 at the top. And the title is optional. So for the types, we're going to say for the types, we want data to be, right now I'm going to set it to any. Now you shouldn't really use any in TypeScript. It kind of defeats the purpose. Later on, we're going to create a product type, and this will be, instead of any, it'll be product. But that doesn't exist yet, so for now, we're just putting any. And then let's put a semicolon, and then title, which is going to be optional. So if we put a question mark here, that signifies that it's optional, and that'll be a string. Okay, so those are the props and the type. Now let's see, in the return, let's have a div, and I just want to add a class name, and I'm just going to add some spacing on the margin on the y-axis, so we'll do my-10. All right, and then I want to show the title in an H2, so let's say H2, and I'm going to give it a class name of H2-bold, which is one of our utility classes, and margin bottom 4, just to push things down. And then in that, we'll have the title. Now let's just bring this in. We're not done with it, but we'll bring it into our home page and show it. So let's see, I'll go right here and say import product list, and let's get rid of the console log. And then in the return, let's see, yeah, in the return, we'll have in our fragment the product list, and it's going to take in data, which is going to be our sample data, okay? And then title, I'm going to set that to a string of newest, we'll say newest arrivals. Okay, so let's save that, and now you should see newest arrivals because that's all we have in our component is that H2. So now we want to basically have a grid, right? If we look at the final version here, this is a grid of products. So under the H2, before we do anything, let's check to make sure that there are some products. So we'll say data.length. So if that is greater than 0, then show something else, show something else. Now in the show something else, it's going to just be a div, and we're just going to have a paragraph that says no, we'll say no products found. And then in this set of parentheses is where we want to basically map through and show a product card for each one. But right now we'll just show the name because we're going to do the card in the next video. But we want this wrapped in some grid classes. So let's do a class of grid, and I'm going to do grid-calls-1, which will be a 1-column grid. Now I want to start with that on small screens, but then, or I should say on mobile screens. But then at the small breakpoint, I want it to be 2 columns. So I'm going to use the Tailwind class grid-calls-2. Then on medium screens and up, I want to have 3 columns. So let's say grid-calls-3. And then on large screens, I want it to be 4 columns. So grid-call or calls-4. All right, and then inside that div is where we want to create our list of products. So let's say data.map, pass in our function, and we'll call each one product. And right now, again, I'm just going to use the type of any, but that'll be product later on. And then open up some parentheses. And for each one, at the moment, we'll just have a div, and we'll put the product product.name. All right, if I save that, we got no products found. Let's see, why is that? Oh, you know what? Because in sample data, let me just show you real quick. So DB sample data, the array is called products. So that's what we want to add here is dot products. And there we go. So now we have a grid with, since we're on the large breakpoint, there's 4 columns. If I make it to the medium, there's 3, small 2, and mobile, there's 1. All right, actually I want to add some spacing, so let's add a gap. So in product list, we're just going to add onto this, let's do gap-4, and that just adds some more spacing. And obviously, we don't want just the name. These are going to be product cards, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. But before we do that, I want to be able to limit the product list, right? So however many we want to show. So for instance, I want to be able to pass in a limit of, let's say, 4. Okay, so I'll just save that, and then let's come back over here into our product list, and let's add the ability to take in limit, and let's add the type. So I'll put a semicolon, and then let's say limit is going to be let's make that optional. So limit is going to be a number, right? And then what we'll do is go above the return, and let's say const limited data, and we'll say if limit. So if there's a limit prop, then I'm going to take that data and use dot slice, and I want from 0 to the limit, else then it's just going to be data, no limit. All right, and then what we'll do is down here where we say data.map, we'll simply say limited data.map. So now let's save that, and now we only have 4 products.